This song is for my 3D from last year. I miss dancing around to this song. Don't tell people that we dance. Don't tell them that Miss Macklin likes to dance. Anyway, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to my channel. This video goes out to my little Lana, who so nicely at the end of class said, Miss Macklin, can you please read some Gangsta Granny if you have time? Such good manners, so polite. And I said, for you, Lana, as soon as Maghreb is over, I'm gonna get to it. And here I am as promised for little Lana and all of you. All right, guys, so we are getting towards the end here. When we left off, Ben and Granny, they were caught trying to steal the crown jewels by none other than Her Majesty the Queen of England. Well, the United Kingdom, technically, but we'll get into that later when we learn history and social studies, geography, and all that stuff. All right, guys, let's get to. Chapter 27 is entitled An Audience with the Queen. What on earth are you doing here? Asked Ben. What on earth are you doing here, Your Majesty? I like to come here when I can't sleep, replied the Queen. She spoke in that instantly familiar posh voice of hers. Ben and Granny were surprised to see she was wearing a nightgown and little furry corgi slippers. She was also wearing the coronation crown on her head. It was the most magnificent of all the crown jewels. The Archbishop of Canterbury placed it on her head when she was crowned queen in 1953. The crown, which dates back to 1661, is made of gold encrusted with diamonds, rubies, pearls, emeralds, and sapphires. It was an impressive look, even for the Queen. I come here to think, the Queen went on. I got my chauffeur to bring me over from Buckingham Palace in the Bentley. I have my Christmas address to the nation in a few weeks, and I need to think carefully about what I want to say. One always finds it easier to think with one's crown on. The question is, what on earth are you two doing here? Ben and Granny looked at each other, ashamed. Being told off was bad enough at the best of times, but being told off by the Queen was a whole other level of being told offness, as this simple graph demonstrates. It goes from parent, teacher, head teacher, air hostess, librarian, postman, scoutmaster, traffic warden, park keeper, vicar, policeman, judge, and the Queen. And why do the pair of you smell like poo-poo? Well, pushed Her Majesty, I am waiting. I am solely to blame, Your Majesty, said Granny, bowing her head. No, she's not, said Ben. It was me who said we should steal the crown jewels. I talked her into it. That's true, said Granny, but it's not what I meant. I started this whole thing when I pretended to be an international jewel thief. What? Exclaimed Ben. Pardon, said the Queen. One is terribly confused. My grandson hated staying with me on Friday night, said Granny. I heard him one night calling his parents and complaining about how boring I was. But Granny, I don't think that anymore, protested Ben. It's all right, Ben. I know things have changed since then. And in truth, I was boring. I just liked to eat cabbage and play Scrabble. I knew deep down that you hated those things, so I made up stories from the books I read to entertain you. I told you that I was an infamous jewel thief called the Black Cat. But what about those diamonds you showed me, said Ben, feeling shocked and angry that he'd been deceived. All worthless, dear, replied Granny. Made of glass. I found them in an old ice cream tub at the local charity shop. Ben stared at her. He couldn't believe it. The whole thing, the whole incredible story was made up. I can't believe you lied to me, he said. I mean, said Granny, falteringly. Ben turned to glare at her. You're not my gangsta Granny after all, he said. Then there was a deafening silence in Jewel House, followed by a rather loud and rather posh cough. Ahem, said an imperious voice. Chapter 28. Hung, drawn, and quartered. I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, said the Queen in her clipped tones. But might we get back to the important matter at hand? I still don't understand why the two of you are here in the Tower of London in the middle of the night, smelling of poo-poo and attempting to steal my jewels. Well, once I had started, the lie grew and grew, Your Majesty, continued Granny, avoiding Ben's eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen. I just got carried away, I suppose. It was so nice to spend that extra time with my grandson, to have fun with him. It reminded me of when I used to read him bedtime stories. That was in the days when he didn't find me boring. Ben fidgeted. He was starting to feel guilty too. Granny had lied to him, and that was horrible, but she'd only done it because she was upset that he thought she was dull. I had fun too, he whispered. Granny smiled at him. I'm glad, little Benny. I'm so sorry, really. Ahem, interrupted the Queen. Oh, yes, said Granny. Well, before I knew it, things had snowballed, and we were planning to take on the most daring robbery of all time. We climbed up the sewage pipe, by the way. We don't usually smell like this, Your Majesty. I should hope not. Pooey! Ben was feeling really guilty now. Even if Granny had never been an international jewel thief, she certainly wasn't boring. She had helped plan this robbery with him, and now here they were in the Tower of London at midnight, talking to the Queen. I have to do something to help her, Ben realized. The robbery was my idea, Your Majesty, he said. I am so sorry. Please let my grandson go, interjected Granny. I don't want his young life ruined. Please, I beg you. We were going to return the crown jewels tomorrow night, I promise. A likely story, murmured the Queen. It's true, exclaimed Ben. Please do what you want with me, Your Majesty, continued Granny. Have me locked up here in the tower forever if you like, but I beg you, let the boy go. The Queen looked lost in thought. I really don't know what to do, said the Queen eventually. I am touched by your story. As you know, I, too, am a grandmother, and my grandchildren find me dull sometimes. Really? Asked Ben. But you're the Queen. I know. The Queen chuckled. Ben was stunned. He had never seen the Queen laugh before. She was usually so serious and never cracked a smile when giving her speech on TV at Christmas, or opening Parliament, or even watching comedians at the Royal Variety Show. But to them, I'm just their boring old granny, she continued. They forget that I was young once. And that they too will be old one day, added Granny with a meaningful look to Ben. Exactly, my dear, agreed the Queen. I think the younger generation need to have a bit more time for the elderly. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, said Ben. If I hadn't been so selfish and moaned about old people being boring, none of this would have ever happened. There was an uncomfortable silence. Granny rummaged in her handbag and offered the Queen a bag of sweets. Murray Mint, Your Majesty? Yes, please, said the Queen. She unwrapped it and popped it into her mouth. Gosh, I haven't had one of these for years. They're my favorite, said Granny. And they last so long, added the Queen as she sucked it before composing herself again. Do you know what happened to the last man who attempted to steal the crown jewels? Inquired the Queen. Was he hung, drawn, and quartered? Asked Ben excitedly. Believe it or not, he was pardoned, said the Queen with a wry smile. Pardoned, Your Majesty, said Granny. In 1671, an Irishman by the name of Colonel Blood tried to steal them, but was caught by the guards as he tried to escape. He hid this very crown I am wearing now under his cloak and dropped it on the ground just outside. King Charles II was so amused by Colonel Blood's daring attempt that he set him free. I must Google him, said Ben. I don't know what Googling is, said Granny. Nor me, chuckled the Queen. So in royal tradition, that's what I'm going to do. Pardon you both. Oh, thank you, Your Majesty, said Granny, kissing her hand. Ben fell to his knees. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Your Majesty. Yes, yes, don't grovel, said the Queen, haughtily. I cannot abide groveling. I have met far too many grovelers during my reign. I am so sorry, Your Majestical Royal Majesty, said Granny. That's exactly what I mean. You're groveling now, replied the Queen. Ben and Granny looked at each other in fear. It was hard not to speak to Her Majesty without groveling at least a little bit. Now jolly along quickly, please, said the Queen, before this whole place is overrun with guards. And don't forget to watch me on the telly on Christmas Day. Chapter 29, Armed Police. It was dawn by the time they trundled back into Grey Close. This time there was no police car to give them a lift. It was a very long way home from London on a mobility scooter. Over the speed bumps they went, bump, 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 and whirred into Granny's drive. What a night, sighed Ben. My word, yes, good golly, I do feel rather stiff from sitting on that thing for so long, said Granny, as she eased her old and tired body off the scooter. I am sorry, you know, Ben, she said after a pause. I really didn't mean to hurt you. It was just so nice spending time with you. I didn't want it to stop. Ben smiled. It's okay, he said. I understand why you did it. And don't worry, you're still my gangsta, Granny. Thank you, said Granny softly. Anyway, I think that's quite enough excitement to last a lifetime. I want you to go home, be a good boy, and concentrate on your plumbing. I will, I promise. No more heists for me, chuckled Ben. Suddenly, Granny froze. She looked up. Ben could hear a helicopter whirring overhead. Granny? Shh! Granny adjusted her hearing aid and listened intently. That's more than one helicopter. It sounds like a fleet. Woo, 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 woo! The sound of police car sirens screeched from all around, and within moments, heavily armed police surrounded them from every angle. Granny and Ben couldn't see any of the bungalows in the close anymore because they were trapped behind a wall of policemen and bulletproof vests. The whir of police helicopters overhead was so deafening that Granny had to turn her hearing aid down. A helicopter came over a megaphone from one of the helicopters. A voice came. You are surrounded. Put down your weapons. I repeat, put down your weapons or we will shoot. We haven't got any weapons, shouted Ben. His voice hadn't broken yet and it came out a bit girly. Don't argue with them, Ben. Just put your hands in the air, shouted Granny over the noise. The Gangsta pair put their hands up. A number of especially brave policemen surged forward, pointing their guns right at Ben and Granny. They pushed them over and pinned them to the ground. Don't move, came a voice from the helicopter. Ben thought, how could I move with a great big policeman kneeling on my back? A flurry of leather-gloved hands made their way up and down their bodies and fumbled through Granny's handbag, presumably searching for guns. If they had been searching for used tissues, they would be in luck, but they didn't find any weapons. Ben and Granny were then handcuffed and brought to their feet. Out from behind the wall of policemen stepped an old man with a very big nose, wearing a pork pie hat. It was Mr. Parker, Granny's nosy neighbor. Well, it looks like young Ben and his Granny have gotten into a little bit more trouble. Can it be any more trouble than with the Queen of England? I'm not so sure. But it looks like we have only 1 to 2 more. Maybe I'll do it all in one session. It looks like it's about 40 pages left. We're getting there. What do you think is going to happen with Ben and Granny? Are they real gangstas? I don't know. I actually have not read this until now, so let's find out in a few days, inshallah. All right, guys, I will catch you later. Hello to Lana, Hayam, Faith Maria, and all my friends that have been tuning in so intently. I will catch you later. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Have a good night and see you soon.